peer group sessions. If you haven't already done so, please add your name and service name or local authority to the chat for our attendance records. Many thanks. So today's session is the second part in a series exploring the child's voice. We will be reflecting on our learning from the first session and hearing from you about your self-evaluation of the practice within your own settings. We will then be moving on to consider the younger child's voice and best practice which can ensure their voice is heard equally and as fairly as their older peers. At our last session, Karina and Tracy covered the UNCRC with a particular focus on Article 12, as well as introducing you to and discussing General Comment 7. So I'll now hand back over to Tracy. Thanks, Tracy.
Hi there, sorry, just unmuting myself. So as Hilary said at the last session, we covered a lot, but we also looked at the Shears pathway presentation slide, and that was kind of, we were looking at that as a self-evaluation tool with regards to the practice within your own setting. We were kind of looking at level 3, that's the sort of the minimum definition, the level that's defined to endorse the UNCRC for the children's rights. So that's the sort of level we should be looking at starting from, really, when you're starting to look at embedding them. The thing with this level is this is when we're starting to look at the power sharing, really, for children and adults, which, let's be honest, it can be a bit of a challenge sometimes, not just with staff, but for parents. You know, there's the traditional roles of adults having most of the power and, you know, telling children and leading children. And this is still sometimes quite obvious in practice. And one example is sometimes we go out to services and the outdoor play. There's some places that I've been to and they've kind of had it as a routine, really. So, you know, children are scheduled when they get to go outside and they'll have their scheduled time regardless of whether they want to go out or not. That's the time they go out, they get back in, which is kind of taking away their choice. But when you delve deeper into it, what we have found sometimes is it's not really about the children, it's about the staff, sometimes the management, and what they feel. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a big echo there, right, that way. So yeah, and it's more about making them feel safe rather than what's best for the children. So they're looking at it from their point of view and not the child's point of view. And it's remembering that, really, at this level, it's about the children as well, and we're looking at things from their perspective, not just the adult one. So we kind of left you with a lot of information to reflect on. And the main things we were kind of asking you to look at were, are you endorsing and embedding the UNCRC within your setting? Are you empowering and enabling children to be responsible for decision making? Are they getting to choose? Are they getting to make important decisions? Are they getting to help set up projects? Is their voices being heard, basically? Or is it just a case of paying lip service to the views? Is it more or less a tokenistic approach, a sort of tick box? Which comes back to what we said last time as well, the so what question. Who is it that we're doing it for? Are we doing it for the adults or are we doing it for the children? And as we said, when you're looking at Shears pathway, it's looking at it from the child's perspective, not necessarily the adult one. And I will now pass you over to Karina, who's going to look at understanding our systems.
Thanks, Tracy. So Tracy already briefly just mentioned at the start about self-evaluation processes. And those questions that Tracy's just said that we left you with, and others, to answer them, a powerful tool is your self-evaluation processes that you've got within your settings. And you'll remember, or hopefully you'll be able to link back to the part about understanding systems that you've probably looked at with Hilary and the team when looking at the quality improvement methodology. So when you're looking at your self-evaluation, you need to make sure you're including all your stakeholders. So that's your families, your children, your staff, any external agencies, and that's so that you can really look at and evaluate how practice is working within your setting and answer any of those questions. So think of it like a picture or a jigsaw that makes a picture. You need all those kind of different pieces to be able to have an accurate view of what that looks like. But if you don't do your self-evaluation right or accurately, you won't get the right information. You won't be able to identify any gaps. You won't be able to answer those questions, or any answers to those questions. They won't be a true reflection of what's happening within your service. So think about it as combining everybody's perspectives, so yourself, your families, your children, and your staff, and how things impact on them, but also how their voice can impact on that self-evaluation process, and answering those questions and identifying those gaps. Because what you want to do is have a common goal so that everybody buys into what it is that needs to happen. And then what you would then hope to be would be that positive impact and those outcomes for children and families and for your staff. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. So when you're carrying out your kind of self-evaluation or looking at your systems within your service, you need to make sure you're gaining the feedback effectively from those people. This links to Article 12 because you're seeking the views of your children and others. But what you need to do is make sure that you're tailoring those questions or those consultations with people so that they're effective. So you need to make sure that your questions for children are age and stage appropriate. You need to make sure that your questions for families are clear for them to understand, and then also for your staff. So you might need to look at the different questions and how you're consulting with all your kind of stakeholders. This picture's great. I really like this picture because it really shows how different perspectives see different things, and it's really important that you remember that. When you can come together as a team, you can really create powerful things, but if you're going to do it individually, you might not get the same impact. So it's making sure that you're gathering all that information from people to support your self-evaluation. But as I've said, think about how you're asking those questions and how you're carrying out those consultations. Quite often when we're out on inspections and we're looking at how services consult with our children or families, we have to have the discussion around the questions that are being asked. So just as an example, if you are going to ask parents around, if we think about children's rights, do you think we listen to children? Parents are likely going to say yes. They're not going to give you anything that would help you to identify any gaps or any improvements needed. So you need to think about what it is that you're asking them, but also make sure that they understand the question. So you're not putting in any jargon, you're not asking around child development, because parents might not know what you mean by that. So when you're asking parents for their views, make sure you're just really clear on what it is that you want the answer, or what is it that you're looking for. So just make sure that you really look at that before you put them out. And the other thing to remember is when you've gathered these views, what happens with them? What are you going to do? So make sure that parents, to close a feedback loop, if parents are giving you feedback, how are you going back to them? Say, you've told us this, so this is what we've done, or this is what we've identified, or thanks to that, this is now what we do. So it's about the outcome of them sharing their views. But your self-evaluation might also need to be reviewed. It's not a one-time thing. So depending on if your children change, your families change, your staff team changes, there's new priorities, your self-evaluation will need to be a live process, and you need to be constantly reviewing that. It's not just done once and then that's the end of it. So remember, just to keep that in mind, that when you're doing these processes, they need to continue, and you need to keep reviewing them to make sure that they're accurate and they're up to date. And I think I hand you back over to Tracy now.
Thank you. So the next thing we're looking at is what's next. Hopefully you've all had time to carry out some self-evaluations within the services now and been able to reflect on the learning that you've had from the last session. So now we're kind of looking to hear from you on how you got on with carrying this out and what you learned about your systems, really. Next slide, please. So there's going to be, I think it's the QR code, Leslie, is it? Did you scan that?
Yep, so if you've got phones or iPads or anything like that handy, if you just scan the QR code, and the questions will appear on your phone to be able to put your responses in. I'll give it a wee second to let everybody scan it, and then I'm going to remove it from the screen. But don't worry if you've not had a chance to scan. When I pop the results on, there will be the QR code in the corner as well.
So you can see the first question we're looking at is how are you endorsing and embedding the UNCRC within your setting? So if you give us just some like key comments, keywords.
Okay, so I'm going to just take this down for a wee second and I can pop the results on for everybody to see. And the QR code's there for anybody else that still needs to scan it.
You can see there that people are typing, so we'll just wait for some of the answers to come up. As Tracy said, you're thinking about keywords with this. Great. Oh. So listening to children. Responsive planning is one of the biggest ones in the middle there. So we've got there as well, giving children a voice. Think about how you're giving them a voice, kind of examples. What ways do you give them that voice? Listening and acting, and that's important. We spoke about that listening to what children are saying is very important, but equally important is what do you then do on that? Karina mentioned there that feedback loop, anything that you get, what are you then doing with it so that the children and families know that they're absolutely listened to? We still got some people typing.
I see somebody's got their focus on Article 12. When you're saying focus on Article 12, was there anything in particular you did that you could just add into there? That would be great. Oh, they're all coming in thick and fast now, Hilary.
Thick and fast.
This is the bit when you can't read them now.
Yeah. Taking the time to listen. I like that because days are very busy. I see you nodding away there as well, Tracy. You see that we all know how busy the days are, but that taking the time to really listen, not that tokenistic, but what is actually going on for them.
And it's a really valuable time, isn't it, Hilary? That and Tracy, that kind of time where, that time you spend listening can give you so much information, so much more information than you might get from that, surveys and trying to fill out tick boxes and stuff. Just taking that bit and thinking about what is it like for them, what does that mean for them, and just having a really good listen.
It's the same with observations. Taking the time, because I know I feel like somebody or a few folk have put on observations, and actually using the time to look at how well the children are engaging, and are they actually, sometimes when we do observations, we're looking at the staff and we're looking at their engagement, but actually, if you look at it from the child's perspective on how engaged they are, and if it's a group activity, for example, is every child feel engaged, or is there some children who are just there and not really fully engaging in it? So it's taking that time to isolate specific when you're doing observations to focus on making sure the focus is on the children as well and the impact that it's having on them, or if it's having any. And then looking at what we can do to improve that.
In the chat there, someone's popped, so giving them how they're giving them their voice, which is through voting, listening to what children say, songs, having a display with children's work, sharing with parents and children, involving children and making it meaningful. Which sums up really what this session's about, isn't it? It's doing things and ensuring whatever you are doing is meaningful and not tokenistic.
And I see somebody's written not what's easy for staff, but I take it that will probably go along with something else that they've written. But I think that's the bit, and it might be difficult for staff initially if this is something new that they're doing, but especially if you're trying to get them to think about really listening and whatever. It might not be easy initially, but the more they do it, the easier it will become, and the better they'll become at it. So, yes, it isn't about you know, finding things that are convenient for staff to do, but actually everything that you can start to introduce and get them to do and think about will give you so much really precious information that it stops becoming difficult for staff. It actually becomes much more useful and much more informative for staff, and so it's just about keep practicing it, keep plugging it away.
And I see, just before we move on to the next question, Terry's added into the chat there about Article 12 and how they're using that in terms of printing it off, breaking it down across the staff team. So just what you're talking about there, about everybody's understanding, using the NDNA toolbox to raise staff knowledge and participation, stories on display that they've written, etc. So there's lots of little practical ways you can look at some of these bits. But will we move on to the next question now, Tracy, and see? There's loads on there. Quite sure we could probably spend the whole session on one question slide, but okay.
Yep, so as you'll see, the second question is, how are you empowering and enabling children to be responsible for decision making and setting up projects? The thing to remember here is the important element is for children to be seen all the way through to setting up the projects as well, so that they're fully involved in all aspects of it.
Again, it's another good opportunity for you to think, how are you doing it? What does that look, I suppose, look and feel like for the children? And as Tracy's highlighted there, very much that setting up and leading on the projects. We wait while all the typing's going on, and then there'll be an explosion of words on the screen that we'll have to try and analyse and read. Here we go. Value and opinions, including everyone. Taking interests on board. Children's choice. What else do we have? Oh, loads now. Spark for planning. Voting for younger children, and that's interesting, because we're going to go on to look a bit more closely at the youngest age group of children later in the session.
Involvement in floor books, that's a good one as well, because I think sometimes we can forget, because we're trying so hard to make floor books look good and be visually, you know, aesthetically pleasing when you're looking at them, but actually children having full ownership of them is one of the ways where children can really be fully engaged, you know, if they get to help set it up, and it's a good way for them to reflect on their learning as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that comes back a bit to what you were talking about earlier, Tracy, with the Shears pathway, as far as that, you know, that balance of the practitioner and the child. So yeah, if the floor book's the child, they use it how they want to use it, as opposed to how you as a practitioner may choose to lay it out.
And I think it's as well, because I mean, lots of people here are saying the responsive planning and the children's. I was out recently at a place and they had floor books of different, so their floor books were based on the children's projects and what they'd been interested in. And one of them was a child had found, there's a little bit of like ribbon that size. It wasn't even ribbon, it was a little bit of rope. And they'd found another child had found another one. So the staff had been like, oh, whose is bigger? And, you know, had brought in all the numeracy, and, you know, we're getting them to measure it all. But by the end of it, the children had actually, and I can't remember what to actually describe it, but now you see that the heist movies and they're trying to break into somewhere and it's all the red lasers and they've got to go between them all to try and get in. The kids had created one of them with the staff outside. They had created this and they were using it as a sort of like balance and trying to get in and out, and they'd taken that in a whole other direction, and the staff just really went with them, but there was still all those rich opportunities for learning in there and play, and, you know, and they'd made a whole big thing out of this, and the kids had made their floor book out of it, explaining why they'd done it. And I think one of them had seen a movie or an advert with something in it, and there was a full group activity that had lasted a couple of days, and the staff just let the children run with it, and it was a lovely activity actually, and they could see how much the children got out of it.
Yeah, no, great example.
And that's a prime example, Tracy, of children really leading their own learning, because when we see projects or when staff see projects, sometimes when we're out, we see the staff leading them, and it's and having to follow a script, and it's not always about the process, it's about that outcome. So actually, in your example, children have just been leading that and staff have just been supporting or facilitating at certain parts, but actually the children have been doing that. So when you see projects or activities, it's important to remember that it's about the children leading them, and we can see, you know, some of those comments coming through around acting upon children's choice. We can see or leading on children's interests. So it's important to remember or that it's a skill for staff to be able to stand back and watch and observe and not intervene. That's really hard for staff to be able to learn to do that. It's a great bit in realising the ambition about it. So it's a skill for staff to learn, but it's okay if things don't go the way that staff or you expect them to go. That's fine, as long as you explain to children, well, it didn't work because. I saw a great example of a child making Play-Doh with a staff member, and they had put too much water in the bowl, so it was all sludgy. It was a great sense experience, but it didn't work out the right way. So the staff member had supported this child, say, well, what do we do next? What do you think we might have to do? So the child had said, oh, we might need some more Play-Doh, some more flour for the Play-Doh. They didn't have any more flour where they were sitting, so they had to go and ask someone else. The child was doing this. They had went over and said to the staff member, can I have more flour? And they were doing this, so they put the more flour in, they made it into the right consistency, and then that child was so excited that that whole process had worked for them. Now, that's a very small thing, but that meant a lot for that child from start to finish. And it wasn't that the staff member said, oh, we need to put it away, we need to restart, oh, actually, this isn't working. The staff member just supported the child's learning in that project experience, you know, however you want to word that. So sometimes things don't quite go to plan, and that's all right. Yeah.
As we say often, there's learning in every failure.
Yep,
Yes,
exactly. Absolutely.
We do. There's the learning how to move forward.
And there's Terry just talking about a good book, and it is a good book, and that's the interfering versus interacting. So I'm sure a lot of you will have that, but if you haven't, then you know, maybe give it a try.
Yeah, I'll just pop the presentation back on.
I think we're on to Karina now. Thanks,
Okay,
Karina.
that should be on.
Thank you. So lastly, following from all your learning and the reflections and the self-evaluations from the last tool, we want to revisit the poll question again. So the question is, how is Article 12 reflected in your daily practice? So fully, somewhat, or not at all. So have we got the poll to pop up for everybody to contribute to?
I am just trying it again, but it wasn't working earlier, Karina, so we may have to use the chat, but
Okay.
bear with me and I shall give it another go because the poll is better.
It's all right if it doesn't work, we can just use the chat. It'll be good to see those comments coming through.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a few issues with polls on Teams this week, haven't we, Leslie? It's
not been working all
it's been a
week
bit
for me,
temperamental,
actually.
but yeah, we can use the chat function, so it's not a problem.
Okay, maybe just go with the chat then, I think, just to save a wee bit of time.
Okay, dokie. So if you could just pop in the chat then where you think you're sitting at in your setting in terms of how Article 12 is reflected in your daily practice. So fully, somewhat, or not at all. If you just pop that in, that would be super. And we can just have a wee look at them coming through. So we've got somewhat's coming through
Mainly
there.
somewhat, yep.
Yeah. And that's okay, because sometimes when you're trying to change practice or improve practice, it can take a while to embed it. You know, and you really want to take time to do it so that you can sustain it. Because if you go too quickly, you know, there's a potential then that you won't sustain it. And sometimes you need to get staff on board, particularly, you know, what Tracy was saying earlier was in terms of that power. It can be really hard for staff to I suppose, give up some of their power, if not all of it, you know, and share that with children. So sometimes you need to get staff to buy in to what you're saying.
Yeah.
which also goes back to tailoring your self-evaluation and how you're consulting with staff and getting them, you know, involved in it.
And
It's
that
just about how you move
fits so
forward.
neatly. Oh, there's polls coming up.
Oh, is that
on
the poll coming up
screen
now?
Yeah, finally. It fits so neatly what you're talking about there, Karina, with, you know, what, you know, everyone on here's covered as part of the improvement programme, is that bit about, you know, that self-evaluation, the checking in with your staff, that going at that pace of change that brings everyone on board. And that does take time. And we always say that, you know, the small steps to get things embedded is more important in the long run.
Sure.
It has the bigger impact. So it certainly seems as though most people are somewhat. And we have there more than somewhat, but not fully, so almost. And I love that, the fact that Margaret's created a new word in there, and that's it, because but this just hopefully gives you all a sense of where you're at in terms of your journey, and things that you might want to work on. Okay. If that's, I don't know that anyone else is typing at the minute, so if we're happy with that.
It's nice to see, sorry, just quickly, Rose is saying that Article 12 are children's rights, that's the focus for their SIP. So that's nice to see that you've got a focus on that, you know, and you know, that'll link in with your self-evaluation that we've just been talking about.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention that.
No, that's perfect, Karina, thank you. Okay, so we're now going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll begin to consider the youngest child's voice. Okay, so really thinking about the youngest age group in your settings, and we're delighted we've got a service along to chat about their experience and some of their examples. So we've got that to look forward to. So we'll just take a very quick, just a 5 minutes to move away from your screen, and we will be back at 10:38 to be precise. See you all shortly. Don't need to leave the call, just cameras off and mics off. See you shortly. Okay, welcome back everyone. Hopefully you've had a chance to just move away from your screen for a little bit, and we'll now continue with the rest of the session. Thanks, Leslie. So we're now going to continue our exploration of the child's voice with the focus on our youngest age groups. Given the age and stage of development, the majority of this age group will not have fully developed their language skills yet, and therefore communication is about so much more than the spoken word. What different types of behaviours do you recognise in this age group of children? What changes in your own style of communication with this age group? Think back to the quote we shared from Albus Dumbledore. How do you listen to your youngest children? And thinking about what Karina and Tracy were talking about in terms of self-evaluation and observation, how do you monitor staff's interactions with children to ensure that they are being heard? And I'll hand on to Karina. Thanks, Karina.
Thanks, Hilary. So one of the models that we want to share with you today is the Lundy model. You may have heard of this, you may be familiar with it, or this may be the first time that you're hearing about it. So the Lundy model was developed by Professor Laura Lundy in 2014, and it extends the concepts of participation beyond the spoken word. So the model suggests that the implementation of Article 12 requires consideration of 4 interrelated concepts. So you'll see them here just from the visual on the slide. So you've got space, voice, audience, and influence. So space, children, they must be given the opportunity to be able to express their views. Voice, they must be facilitated to support, to express their views. Audience, their view must be listened to. And then influence, it must be acted upon as appropriate. So contained within the model are reflective questions for each of these areas, and it's to support you in your self-evaluation, answering those questions that Tracy had mentioned earlier about the practice within your own setting. And this might be a good thing to sit with staff and do as well if you want staff to buy into it or to upskill themselves. However, Lundy also suggested that due to the interconnectedness with our human rights, Article 12 can't be looked at on its own. It can only be understood when it's taken alongside all the other articles of the Convention, because all the other articles, they do link in some way. So, for example, if we're looking at Article 12, which is about children's voice, and that's what we're talking about, you might want to think about Article 3, which is the best interest of the child, or Article 19, the right to be safe. So, for example, a child, in terms of child protection, may make a disclosure to yourself, or their behaviour might indicate there's concerns there. So that's the right to be heard, or the right for their, which is Article 12, and then the right to be safe, Article 19. But also, as an example from my own practice, and whilst this isn't about a very young child in terms of a baby, it's about a child who was non-verbal, who had significant complex needs, and what this child wanted and what he felt he needed was he needed to be able to climb on furniture, he needed to be able to climb on worktops, any very tall person, so any dads that come into the service, he would approach them and want to be lifted. He had no recognition of fear or danger. He was doing that because of his additional support need and his need for that sensory feedback, but it wasn't in his best interest because it wasn't keeping him safe. So whilst we were hearing what he was saying through his gesture, through his behaviour, through knowing this child, we couldn't let him continue to climb on furniture or worktops or anything of high nature that was unsafe. So we then had to facilitate safe climbing through, climbing apparatus indoors or in the gym hall or wherever it happened to be. So that's just an example of where there's different articles there that come in, but it's also not about the spoken word. It was about us understanding that child and their behaviour, their gestures, and so on and so forth. Something else to consider as well that Laura Lundy does talk about is when you're seeking the views of children, it's okay to explain to children why their views can't be acted upon, either in that moment or at all. So, for example, sometimes we'll go out during inspections and we will speak to children and we'll ask them, you know, what can make your nursery or childminder or playgroup or out of school care, wherever we are, what can make it better? Well, I would really like a 6-foot swimming pool in the back garden. And it's okay to say to a child, well, we can't have that because, for whatever reason, but we could do da-da-da-da-da, or, you know, an alternative. It's okay to say to children you can't do it, as long as you're explaining why, and it's about closing that feedback loop, as myself and Hilary were talking about earlier. But it also allows children to feel heard and valued and considered. Now, that's for children who maybe can voice it, but you also do need to think about your very, very young children. How do you hear their views and how do you act upon that? And how do you close the feedback loops with those children? So this model will help to support you within your practice, and using those reflective questions and your self-evaluation will be able to help you and your staff team identify where are we not going so well at, what do we need to get better at. So have a wee look at it if you've not seen it. It really is a good model. And I think I hand you over to Tracy now, I think.
Thank you, Karina. So yeah, as Karina was discussing there, the London model it's a really good model to look at, and the Scottish Government have actually developed their own participation model, which was based on Lundy's model. And you can find that in the Voice of the Infant Best Practice Guidelines and the Infant Pledge, so you'll be able to easily access that online. Again, the focus here is on the infant children as well, and as Article 12 highlights, all children have a right to meaningful participation, and that does include our youngest children and the babies in the setting. So obviously, as we know, some of this group will not be able to speak, they'll not have fully developed their language skills. So this is where it comes back again to the responsibility of practitioners to find creative ways to facilitate this, and crucial to remember that children's rights are not age divided. And as much as we were saying earlier on, you know, it's you know, embracing children and giving children the power, we still have that. There's a lot of discussion about rights and responsibilities, and children have these rights, but as an adult, it's our responsibility to make sure that these rights are met, and particularly for the youngest ones. And that really comes down to listening to parents, listening to your own knowledge, and knowing your children really well, so that you can pick up, you know, on non-verbal cues and fully understand information that you're trying to tell you. So thinking back on your own self-evaluations, any reflections, observations that you've done following on from the first session, have a think about, did you actually evaluate the practice for the youngest group of age groups of children? And if so, like, what did you get from that? What information did it tell you? Next slide, please. So the Scottish model of infant participation highlights that good practice should always address space, voice, influence, and audience, which are interrelated and overlapping. It's a bit like the jigsaw that Karina discussed earlier on. You know, these are 4 vital parts, and you kind of need all of them to make sure, you know, so you need your space to make sure that it's, you know, children have safe spaces to be in, and that it's inclusive, and, you know, it's theirs as well. You know, and they need facilitation to help express their views for those who are non-verbal or just too young to speak. And then the influence is the part where we come in, where we have to act upon them as appropriate. As Karina said, there are going to be times where you're going to have to say no, and that's okay, but it's explaining why, and not just, you know, dismissing it. And the audience, it's us listening to it, you know, and fully hearing them properly. It means that you're representing a child-centred approach with the youngest children as well, in considering and using a variety of ways to not only just capture their views, you know, not making it a tick box exercise, but taking them forward and acting on them, which, let's be honest, it requires creativity and innovation when it, you know, in ways of working from all practitioners. So Hilary is now going to talk you through each of these aspects in turn to consider what they mean and how this will relate to your early year settings.
Thanks, Tracy. Okay, so let's have a look at the first one, space. So this is about the direct physical environment in which young babies and children are cared for. How does this take into account their individual needs, including their age and stage of development? And think about, how do you adapt this in response to children's voices and opinions? You also need to think about their emotional space. What do you consider when you think of the emotional environment for this age group? A good document to have a look at is the Space to Grow and Thrive document, which can be used for reference when you're doing a bit of self-evaluation on space, and in particular, pages 21 to 30 of that document would be quite good for you to maybe have a review and further reflections on the space for some of your youngest children. So the second one is voice. The best practice guidance highlights that babies and young children have a voice that must be listened to. This voice is heard and seen in the noises and movements they make, their response to the environment, and in their interactions with the people who are with them. So within your own settings, have a think about how you observe your youngest children. What do these observations tell you about how they are feeling and what their needs are? And most importantly, coming back to that influence bit, what do you do to respond to this? It's important to observe and capture, but it's crucial that you then take forward your findings. So the next one is audience, and this is referring to those around your youngest children. So within your settings, this would mainly be the staff team, but it could also include some older children, depending on the layout and style of your setting. So during observations and interactions, it's important that all communications from the youngest children are listened to, such as vocalising, emotions, which could be happy, crying, or being silent, body language, etc. And don't forget to think about staff body language and communication with this age group. This is how these younger children will sense and know that they are being listened to and will respond. So therefore, it's important to consider what observations you are carrying out in these rooms around staff practice and interactions. And then, again, crucial that you provide clear feedback to staff to support any improvements required. The best practice guidelines highlight that with regard to babies and younger children, they should be co-producers of our services, contributing their views to design and implementation. We explored this particular aspect for older children in the last session, and you carried out some of your own self-evaluations for this. So now have a think, what about this younger age group? How well are their opinions and voice included in your service development? Thinking again of Article 12, how does this apply to your youngest children? And coming back to that important point that Tracy highlighted earlier is about them developing and leading, setting up projects. It's not always just about asking their opinion. And lastly, influence. So this is referring to the steps which are taken to clearly demonstrate that babies and young children's voices are valued in the setting and that they are considered from a co-productive perspective when thinking about designing and delivering your services. Given the age group, there is a recognition that the approach to this can be more challenging. However, it is something which needs to be done to ensure that their voice is heard. So Karina's example earlier was a great example where it's about observing and understanding what children are telling you in their behaviour and their language and how you can support that. So highlighted within the best practice guidance is that in order that babies and very young children can be prioritised in this process, it is good practice to ensure that someone specifically represents their views about the services they are receiving. So have a think, what systems or processes do you have in place within your own settings to support this? Do you have a specific person in a champion role, for example, who may take responsibility to ensure the younger child's voice is heard by those in decision-making roles to influence change and the setting? Okay, so now we're delighted to be joined today by Oakburn Early Years Centre in East Dunbartonshire. Margaret Harris is the head of centre and Emma is senior early years worker. They've come along today to talk about their setting and how they embed UNCRC and the child's voice throughout their nursery. So I'll hand over now to Margaret. Welcome, Margaret.
Hi there. Morning,
Hi,
everybody.
Thanks, Margaret.
So when we were first asked to just come and just give a little bit of information on how we embed UNCRC, it really did kind of start us thinking about what exactly it is we do. To give you a bit of context, our nursery is fairly a new build within East Dunbartonshire Council, and it's classed as an outdoor nursery with indoor space. So we have the playrooms inside, but we also then have a courtyard that is covered, completely open to the elements. And then we have a very large outdoor space. So For that, for children accessing that, it's completely free flow. We have children aged 2 to 5, and all of our children, our doors are open from the playrooms. So they can decide where they want to go, if they want to be inside taking part in activities, or if they want to spend time in the courtyard or outdoors. So that's the first choice that they have when they come in the mornings or the afternoons, is, you know, they make a decision of where they want to go, who they want to play with, what adults they would like to go and see. In relation to the UNCRC, we have a member of staff who is our champion, and we have a kind of children's group. So again, within that group, we have members from our 2-year-old room, and we also have members within the 3 to 5, so that all of our children, the voices are being heard from the 2-year-old stage all the way up to our kind of children ready to go to school. Then moving on to kind of other things that we do, is our planning process is based mainly, well, I would say completely on the interests of the child. Our staff are very, very skilled in provocations, and these provocations are kind of set out every single day for the children, and then from those provocations the staff will observe, they will listen, they will talk with the children, and then from that they will find a spark of where the children are wanting to learn about, where their interests are, and then it's taking it from there with the children. So if they're wanting to find out more about, I'm trying to think, some we've done recently, we've actually, there's recently been an Oakburn wedding, and that stemmed from 2 of the children who are very good friends were wanting to get married. So from this, the staff asked the children, well, what do we need to do? What do you need for a wedding? How do we plan the wedding? So the children started everything from, they needed bridesmaids, groomsmen, flower girls, they needed to write invitations. They had to have a party after it, so they had to decide what they were going to have to eat at their party. So again, all this stemmed from the children, all the work they put into their invites, their menus. We had someone come in from one of the bridal shops with lots of different wedding dresses, and we done a say yes to the dress type event. And then, as I say, when everything kind of came together, the children went ahead, had their wedding. We invited in the parents to see it as well. And after it, all the children sat down for their wedding breakfast, and that was all served by the children as well. So children who wanted to wear the chef's hats and everything went around and asked the children what they would like for their wedding breakfast from their menus. It was great. The children learned so much. Staff talked openly about different relationships, how people love different people and everything as well. So, you know, the opportunities the children had about learning lots of different things and, you know, right across the curriculum was huge. And as I say, this all stemmed from 2 children who said that they wanted to get married. So we just, the staff just ran with it with the children. Again, they said what they needed to do, what they had to have, and that was facilitated by the staff. Throughout the whole environment, we have the articles around in different playrooms, different articles. Like you said, how Article 3 links into Article 12. So all of these are together so that children know that if there is something that we're maybe not able to facilitate, you know, we usually ask them first, why do you think, you know, we couldn't do that? And, you know, quite a lot of them might say something along the lines of, well, it's not very safe. So it's getting them to think about it as well. For our displays, they're all at the children's level. We have their voices up there, what they've said about it, also photographs, their work. So everything, you know, that kind of goes into a floor book, we display up on the walls for the children to see, to be able to go back and discuss it, talk to their friends about it and everything as well. That as well, the planning goes on to our floor books, which we were saying earlier, the children are fully involved in. You know, so you'll see the children's writing, you'll see the photographs that they've wanted to put in, describing what's happening, and also the articles are in there as well, along with Shinari as well. And again, that's just then put into the learning journals where the children, they have access to it as well, where they can go in and see what their learning has been and everything. So just kind of going back to the wedding, you know, there's lots of different things that we've done along the same lines of that, but it's just the children are fully involved and they're the ones that are making all the decisions. Our 2-year-olds, it's, you know, a bit different, you know, how to gather their voice, how do we make sure that they're being listened to? So within that, we refer quite a lot to language and communication friendly environment. And, you know, again, that's reflecting the 3 to 5s, but more so within the younger room, because some children may not have that language and may not be able to kind of voice their opinions and their views. So a lot of it is we use visuals, we do a lot of voting for those children. And as I say, we use language communication friendly environment strategies. And, you know, making sure that our staff have a in-depth knowledge of those, you know, about getting down to the child's level, having that eye contact, you know, really listening to what they're saying. For children who don't have clarity in language, it might be repeating it back to them just to make sure you've understood what it is that they've said and that you're very clear on what their wants and needs are. And we also do mentoring for that as well, where we will go out and, you know, we will do audits of the kind of child and adult interactions. Again, it's not just looking about how the children, how the adult is interacting with the child. You know, that is very important, the listening, but also how the children are engaging as well. And, you know, when they are voicing their opinions and their views, making sure that, you know, staff are listening and that, you know, it's not just that kind of tokenism listening, that they are really listening to them. For, again, the younger children, we do a focus child, and we do that every 6 months, and that's for all the children within the centre. I'm sorry, I'm just going to mute me just now because we've got our fire test just now, 2 seconds. There we go. Sorry about that. I'm just deafening everybody. Apologies if I have. So yes, we have a focus child observation, and now our janitors did a second test for some reason. So yes, apologies again. I've totally lost my train of thought now. So our focus child is what we do with all children every 6 months. And that gives the key worker of each child that opportunity to spend, you know, a few days really paying attention to that child, really getting to know them, you know, looking to see where they go, what they like, their likes, dislikes, their interests, where they like to be. And we try to do that maybe around about 6 weeks or so.
6 weeks
after they've kind of settled in. And then again, 6 months after that. And within that, you know, the child is involved with what they would like to learn, where they would like to be, you know, lots of different things. Maybe some children might say they want to learn how to play football. Some children might say, oh, they want to learn how to count, maybe been listening to their peers, you know, so all that's recorded in there and shared with the parent as well. And the views of the parents are included in this, again, with how they feel their child is getting on, what would they like their child to do next. So within that focus child, the key worker has a great opportunity to really get in-depth knowledge of their child, asking the child what they want to do, and also the parents. So everybody is involved in that focus child observation. That is really the main things that we do. We've also, the authority as a whole has looked at how the recording of planning is done within our under 3s. As say, we have 2-year-olds, but we don't have babies. 3 of our centres within the authority have babies, but they were really looking at something that was consistent across authority. And I'll pass over to Emma. Emma was involved in the kind of working group to develop a planning system for the younger child, again, just to make sure that, you know, we're getting it right for the little ones as well.
So over the last year, myself and the deputy have been part of the working party to create a document for under threes. And we looked at like different documents that are about and tried to pull different things from different places to try and create something that was easy to understand and easy to use for our staff. So with that, we used it and we've made it into all the different ages and stages. And then so that allowed that if, for example, you had a child coming in at 2, but they hadn't met the steps before, you could kind of go backwards to support the children in that development and ages to create that. But also it helps with children with ASN as well. It allows the staff members to go backwards so they can hit the targets, because it's all about celebrating the achievements that they've got and not tracking a child, just because we feel that they're still quite young to be tracking them. But obviously we do need to celebrate all these different milestones that they have got. And we have recently launched it within Eastern Bartonshire, so from August, hopefully, quite a lot of the nurseries in Eastern Bartonshire will be using it. Because we were just a couple of nurseries that were in it, were just piloting it whilst we were using it. And in that, the staff were involved in a lot of the, like, their voice and all that were involved in the creation of it, because we wanted it to be suitable for them to use as well, not just a generic document.
And within that document as well as say, you know, you're looking at all the other documents that it's out there, you know, previously your pre-birth to 3 and realising the ambition. You're also kind of looking into UNCRC, Shinari. So it's about incorporating all those documents together to make sure that we are doing the best that we can for our youngest children. And again, highlighting that, you know, including their voices, keeping them safe, you know, the right to play and everything as well. So that is something that, as Emma said, is going to be rolled out. But again, it's just having that consistent approach throughout the authority, and so that all children are getting the same opportunities in every single centre without Eastern Bartonshire, regardless of where it is. So that's you know, really where we are in our UNCR journey just now. You know, there's always, you know, things that you can do to make it better. You know, we're always consistently self-evaluating how we implement, you know, not just UNCRC, but, you know, lots of other documents within the centre. But we do believe we still do have a little work to do, but, you know, capturing the child's voice, being respectful of their voice and their choices is high on our agenda. And we feel that with everything that we have in place just now, that we're getting there. We're almost there, but again, there's times where you might find it a little bit more difficult, and, you know, it might be due to something that's not safe, or, you know, it could be levels of staffing. You know, when you've got this time of year annual leave, sickness and things, you may not be able to spend as much time listening to children and, you know, going and acting upon those if, you know, you are short-staffed and things like that. And, you know, that there's an understanding that sometimes these things happen, but it's important to also know that, you know, it's something that we need to continue to do and ensure that that's continually getting fully embedded when we can.
Thanks, Margaret and Emma, that's great. I certainly know, I mean, there may be other people who have questions, and absolutely we'll move on to questions. Firstly though, I certainly would like to hear a little more about the champion role that you've spoken about, like what that actually looks like in terms of how it was developed and what they do. So thinking back to the model there and that influence, what is it they're doing with how they're taking forward some of that?
So part of our PDR process for staff is that we look at what you are interested in as a staff member. It's not always about what is on our improvement plan, although that is very important. But I fully believe for someone to really, you know, be fully committed to an improvement is that they have got to have an interest in it, and they have got to want to make a difference to children and obviously the outcomes in their life. So we start from the PDR process, and one of our members of staff was really interested to take UNCRC forward within the centre. As I say, we are a fairly new centre. We've just been open for 3 years. So, kind of last year, this member of staff really wanted to kind of go with it. So she actually got in touch with the commissioner, and she'd went on to the start of the training for the rights respect in schools. And following some of that training, she felt that it wasn't fully appropriate for children under 5. It was more directed to children of school age. So she contacted Rights Commissioner, and they had conversations, and they then let us know that that was something that they were working on as well, and that they had developed this book, which was great. It was absolutely fantastic. So to kind of look at the work that we were doing as well, as I say, we'd all registered with the UNCRC, and the children were introduced through kind of activities or group times, about their rights, all the different articles. That's something that was shared with all the staff. It's something that we're working on. Again, these can create some funny kind of conversations, because at one point when we asked, for everything to be reset for lunchtime, we had a couple of little ones coming to us and saying, no, I have the right not to tidy up. So it kind of threw up some challenges. But in response to that, we also said that, everybody else, as do I, have the right to be safe. Do we think looking around, it's, very, very safe with all these toys on the floor, and they thought, no, it's not. And so then that was, kind of what we used, that, yeah, we do have rights, but we also have the right to be safe, and we have, we need to keep you safe as well. So as I say, it did bring up conversations like that. We had
that's the learning opportunity from it, though, isn't it? What Karina was saying, that they may ask something or ask for something or say something like that you're like, well, no, that's perhaps not. But it opens up that discussion and really helps their understanding then, and the safety of others, things like that. Yeah.
Yes. So as you say, you do have rights. You're completely correct, but everybody else also has a right to be safe. So it was good, and the parents were coming in and speaking to us about it as well, because the children were going home and speaking to their parents, about what they had learning and their rights, and they had the right to be safe and things, and have their voices be heard. And as I say, we also have our rights elephant.
Connection's gone a bit funny, Margaret. I hope we've not lost connection.
They were fully involved in what that was. So we have an elephant who goes home, and within that bag there is the articles, and there is some suggestions on how you can discuss this with your children, and then there's a little book where you can record what you did. So some of the things that come back is under article to get the right to play. Some of the children have recorded taking the elephant to the park and things like that. So there's a lot within that as well, and it's raising awareness within families as well, that's something that we're focusing on here in the nursery. As we move on next year, we are going to be looking at having more staff who are involved in that, and not just one member of staff.
Not just one. Okay, you're going to build on it now. You've established it then, and it's working well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a big piece of work, and it means we have sometimes quite a lot of people moving on, whether it's through secondments, or going to other authorities, and it just means that knowledge is there, between a few members of staff rather than just one.
Yeah.
And as I say, developing every year that group of children who you know, you have meetings with, and you say to them what they would, you know, like to do next, and it's about them being able to share that with their peers as well. So it's not, you know, just the staff that are doing that work, it's actually sharing that with the children so that they're then able to share that knowledge and information with their peers and with younger children as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. It's good to hear it in context, you know, and get that additional detail. We probably have about 5 minutes just before we need to move on. Does anyone else have any questions that for Margaret and Emma? Can I put hand up, or you can pop it into the chat? I think, Margaret, you're happy for us to share contact details and things, so you can get in touch with Margaret after today if you go away and think about something or want to have a more in-depth discussion. Is that okay, Margaret?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. That's no problem at all.
Great, thank you. But does anyone have anything they want to just ask Margaret and Emma just now?
Margaret, can I just ask a question in terms of something we were talking about earlier was trying to get staff to buy into that vision of really supporting and facilitating children's rights. We've talked a wee bit about power, and that might come down to staff skills and knowledge, or it might just come down to that kind of that transition or that shift from having power and moving across. Have you came across any difficulties with trying to get staff on board, or did you identify that as a staff team that you needed to develop skills, knowledge? 'Cause I know you've got your champion, but I suppose this is about everybody having that kind of knowledge to be able to do it. Did you come across anything like that, or any kind of tips and hints of, we found this training, we've done this, or you know, anything like that you can share?
So we've actually been very lucky in the sense that when we do kind of introduce anything new, we do have a staff team who are quite, you know, open and willing to try new things. But, you know, part of the training was a champion had a bit of time on the in-service day, who was shared with all the staff what she had been doing and really the importance behind it. And I think when, you know, we share with staff why we're doing what we're doing, there's that greater buy-in for it, and it's not just, you know, maybe coming from the top, this is what you're doing and, you know, that's it. It's about putting that context behind it, and then, you know, if anybody has got any questions or, you know, any kind of concerns, right, you know, how are we going to do that? And there was some people who would say, you know, what if it's, you know, not safe, as you say, like little ones, you know, wanting to maybe be really tall and climbing up trees, where they're wanting to go to the very top and things. You'd like, well, you know, that's that conversation you need to have with the child. It's about the staff member then having the confidence to say to the children, well, why do you think we can't go right to the top? What do you think might happen? You know, get the children to think about it and link that, you know, to their risk assessing and things. And I think once, as I say, you have that open conversation, you're given that the staff is that bit more confidence, and you're empowering them as well. You know, that if they've got a greater knowledge of it, then they're more likely to be able to go in and embed that as well. And as I say, for everybody, you know, they are all fully on board with the UNCRC, and that children, you know, should have rights, and that we should be promoting these rights, because unfortunately, you know, there's some children who don't have these rights, and, you know, families who won't offer children these rights. So while they're in our care, it's very important for us to promote that, and, you know, give the children, empower the children as well, you know, that they do have rights, they do have a voice, and you know, it's okay to speak up and, you know, say what you're thinking and how you're feeling and everything like that. So so far we've not kind of come across any really hard challenges.
That's great, and it just shows the power of staff sharing their interest, their training, you know, with their colleagues, and getting everybody in. And it's about making sure staff know that children have their rights, and it's just about how we facilitate them. And this is how we could go forward. So thank you for sharing. That was great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Margaret. And Emma, it was wonderful to hear how you're using, children's voice, the impact on learning, some of those examples. And as we've said, we will share Margaret's contact details. Leslie will do that at the end of the session. So please feel free, if you want to have any further discussions, to get in touch with Margaret and Emma. Okay. So the infant pledge was developed as part of the Voice of the Infant Best Practice Guidelines and is written from the child's perspectives. It identifies their right to be seen as an individual and their views and opinions to be respected as such. There are 3 key headings which cover expectations for how they will be treated, the needs of the important adults in their lives, and a reminder that it is everyone's responsibility to consider them and their perspective at all levels of decision making. Now, this is available as a printable PDF poster, which can be easily displayed in your settings. So use these points and those reflective questions within the participation models and carry out further self-evaluation for your youngest age group of children. So now that we have begun to better understand your systems, with regards to meaningful child participation, you can move on to plan for what you aim to improve. So before we round up the session, we'd like to hear from you about what one thing you will take away and aim to use within your own settings. And I'll pass over to Leslie for the QR code. Thanks, Leslie.
Thanks, Hilary. Okay, so if you just scan the QR code again, just same as before, I will remove it in a wee second, but it will reappear when I put the results slide on. So
we've covered, thanks Leslie, we've covered a lot of information these last 2 sessions, so that's what this question's in relation to. There might be quite a few things you want to take away and work on, but as we always talk about in quality improvement methodology, it's starting small, starting with one thing. So what has been one of the key things that you've taken away from it? Right, steady.
I love the first one that I saw was the Lundy model.
The Lundy model.
Made me really happy to see that up there.
Sharing Lundy model again, shares pathway, children's champion. More confidence in this. That's a nice one to see. And we talk in the programme, you'll all remember, we talk about that understanding the why, and that's how you get people on board. And it's also, that's where the confidence comes from, because if you understand why something is needed or a theory behind something, it absolutely gives you the confidence to take it forward. So that's great to hear.
Infant pledge is up there. Remember, there's the guidelines as well that go along with it, that you might want to have a look at, but that's great to see that someone wants to, delve a wee bit deeper into the infant pledge.
I like refreshed and inspired. That's lovely to hear.
To talk to staff about it, that's nice. To talk to staff, that's really important. A lot of confidence, in there. That's good. Hopefully there has been, some inspiration to build the confidence within services.
Yeah. Lundy model still sitting as the biggest one there in the middle. Yep. Make sure to involve everyone. Yeah. What do we have there? Children's rights stories. Yep. Because it's thinking about, translating what it is that into a context that helps children with their learning and understand it. So yeah.
And also, thinking about sharing this kind of information with your parents, because actually some parents might not even know about children's rights, and it's not that, and I mean just the UNCRC in itself, so, it's just about sharing that information with your parents if you're thinking about doing those kind of home links, with the teddy bears or the elephants, whatever you want to do, that you've got that information in there, so the parents know and can develop their understanding, about children's rights or UNCRC.
Yeah, and I think it's important as well, when it's like we mentioned last time, rights aren't tied just because children have got these rights, the parents aren't losing any. In fact, it can actually maybe help a lot of the times. If they look at a rights-based kind of point of view, it can sometimes help you know, with communication and things. So yeah, it's really important to get the parents on board, because again, as we spoke about earlier with the whole power shift, it can be quite difficult for adults, and parents are some of the ones who can find that quite difficult.
Particularly 8 o'clock in the morning when children are saying, I have a right not to do that, and parents just want to get their shoes on to get them out the door because they need to go to work and they need to get to nursery. You know, so that can be where a wee bit of conflict comes in, because children are saying this is my right to do, but if parents are maybe not understanding where that's coming from, you know, that can maybe become a bit of a stressful situation. So yeah.
We have a question in the chat there for Margaret. What was the name of the book on UNCRC that Margaret mentioned?
So to get the exact name, Emma's just a way to get it for us. And as I say, I can put it on the chat.
If you could add it into the chat, Margaret, that would be brilliant. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Okay, well, that's great to see all the different things there coming forward, and quite, you know, hopefully your heads are buzzing with ideas now of things that you're going to move on. And in line with that question there about the book, as always, we have our list of key resources for you, which allows you to go away and carry out some of your own further reflection and learning on some of the things that we've shared today. So Leslie will put a slide up, so there they are there, but Leslie will email this out to everyone so that you can access those resources, and Margaret's going to pop the name of the book in the chat. There was the book that Terry mentioned earlier in the chat as well, so that's another great benefit of these sessions, where you've got lots of people coming with different ideas or different material that they've read. There we are. Thank you, Margaret. So it's Let's Explore Our Rights. Okay, so everybody can find that there in the chat. Tracy, you mentioned a document recently that had come from Starcatchers that they were looking at.
Yep, they had actually they held a webinar yesterday for the launch of it. So for anybody that's not familiar with them, Starcatchers are an arts and early years organisation who've spent a lot of time focusing on the youngest children and how to develop their rights and how to work with children's rights in practice. So as I say, the webinar yesterday was for the launch. So they've released a reflective guide and a practice guide for practitioners, looking at the voice of the baby. I think it's actually called "Put the Voice of the Baby at the Heart of Decision Making," which is a lovely little title. And
lovely title, yeah.
Reading from the feedback yesterday and stuff from it, there seems to be connections that it's made to realising the ambition as well. In the articulation of their interactions, experiences, spaces. So there's lots of links in there with things that we discussed today. But they've now been launched, so they'll be on the Starcatchers website, or if you've got them on Twitter, there's links to them there that you can access.
Perfect. That's great. And the link to Starcatchers is one of the ones on the resource slide that Leslie will send out. Great. Okay. So just before we finish up, we are called the Improvement Team, and therefore we are always keen to hear your feedback and think about things that we can change and improve, and particularly about the peer group sessions we offer. So please scan the QR code and complete the feedback survey. Okay, so you can scan the code and then complete the survey in your own time. Responses are anonymous. Please be honest. You know, your feedback, your views and opinions are very important to us, and contribute to how we further develop what we offer in terms of peer groups in future. So that can be the style and format of what we offer, as well as getting some ideas from you about topics and content to contribute. So many thanks to seeing you all today. Has been really wonderful. Many thanks again to Karina and Tracy for joining us for this second part of the session. It's been really great to have you on board. And many thanks to Margaret and Emma for coming along and sharing your experience, your practice, and being open to some of the participants on the call getting in touch regarding picking your brains, I suppose, a little more about some of the UNCRC and things that you do. So hopefully everyone's enjoyed today. If you found the peer group session useful, then please share your thoughts in a post on X, formerly known as Twitter, using the hashtag ELCimprove. So thanks again. Lovely to see you all, and see you all again soon. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. And I will just say, for anybody that's maybe not had a phone handy and wasn't able to scan the QR code, the email that I send out with the key resources, I will put the link to the survey on for anybody who's not been able to do it just now.
That's perfect. Thanks, Leslie.
Thanks, everybody. Hope you all have a lovely summer, and we'll see you later on.
See you later in the year.
Thank you.
all.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you very much for
Bye.
having us.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.